Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the BioInnovate Fellowship Program Information Webinar this evening. I will begin this evening's discussion, and thanks everybody for logging on this evening. I know it's slightly late in the evening, but a great number of participants are already online, which obviously demonstrates the significant interest in the BioInnovate program itself. So the program and the webinar today should be about an hour long. What we'll try and cover is a little bit about the fellowship program itself, by design on which the program is based, the success of the program, and then specifically why you should apply. Now, I'll be a bit biased because I think that anybody who's listening in today, if you already have an idea that you want to apply, go ahead and apply. It's a fantastic program. It literally, and I don't say it lightly, it is a world-class program, particularly like that, obviously, in medical device development. So please do, if you're considering applying, go ahead and put the application in, because obviously the program team will consider everybody's application, and people have come from various different backgrounds. So again, as in, I'm a little bit biased, but I think everybody online almost should apply. In addition, if I don't convince you, we're also going to have interviews with previous fellows, Annette Kent, Brendan Staunton, and Camille O'Malley. And then we'll finish with an open question and answer session with Dr. Sinead Walsh and Professor Martin O'Halloran of the BioInnovate program team, who should be able to answer all of the other questions that you have. So BioInnovate itself is a program which is at the intersection of the key players for any medical innovation process, that industry, academia, and clinicians. And really what BioInnovate is that it's a leading global innovation hub. The efforts of BioInnovate is all to try and positively impact people's lives everywhere, really by educating the next generation of health device and health tech entrepreneurs. And that's really what BioInnovate is about. It's educating people in the process of identifying unmet clinical needs, inventing a solution, and then implementing that solution. So those three tenets, identify, invent, and implement, are the core tenets of Stanford Biodesign. Now, Stanford Biodesign is like that, based in Stanford University in California. And it was from there that really BioInnovate originated. BioInnovate itself was founded in University of Galway in 2011. And like that, it's a specialized program in the development of new medical technologies and a digital health innovation. Really, it's all about exploring unmet clinical needs and then accelerating the development of medical technology. For those of you who aren't familiar with Stanford Biodesign, it is the premier program in the world for medical device development and medical innovation. It is probably the most highly thought of medical innovation program there is worldwide. And being Europe's only affiliate is a massive endorsement for BioInnovate. So it really is a huge validation of the quality of the BioInnovate program. In addition to that, being connected to that program also provides huge opportunities for BioInnovate fellows, many of which I've taken advantage of myself in the terms of ecosystem and connections across the US and across Europe. So like that, as in BioInnovate itself as a standalone program is phenomenally successful, and then being linked with the world's other most successful program is a real benefit for the program participants. Worldwide connections are important, but the base of the program itself is the University of Galway, and the University of Galway obviously has been the primary supporter of the BioInnovate program since its foundation in 2011. So like that, as in, the BioInnovate program itself sits on campus, but around the BioInnovate program are all of the other key stakeholders. So as in, that's the hospital, industry, academia, investors, other professionals, data science, etc. And of course, the college bar, which can be of huge importance at various different times. But in all seriousness, it is very important to be in the center of an innovation hub. And like that, as in for medical devices, Galway is a massive innovation hub. Galway itself then sits within a national innovation hub, so to speak. So Ireland is one of the world's leading medtech developers. About 450 medtech companies are based in Ireland. 17 of the top 20 medtech companies in the world are based here. And we're the fifth highest per capita in the production of patents, particularly in medtech, which I think is absolutely just phenomenal. Maybe not given the fact that around 38,000 people are employed in the country in medtech. So I guess what we're trying to point out is that BioInnovate sits in the center of a medtech hub in Galway, and Galway sits well bedded into the medtech hub that is Ireland. Similarly, like that, for connections of the program, so obviously the funders are University of Galway. The company has been very, very strongly supported by Enterprise Ireland. But we'll also see, though, that major medtech companies support the program, such as Boston Scientific, Craigana, Aerogen, Abbott, and Medtronic. They do so because the program has a proven track record of success. These companies don't fund things that don't have a proven outcome. And since 2011, BioInnovate has had a really strong track record. That then facilitates collaboration with other innovative and innovation programs. So as I said, BioInnovate is the international European affiliate to Stanford Biodesign. We also work with Biodesign Oxford, the Sorbonne, and multiple different really, really exceptional academic centres across the world. Within Ireland as well, we're also really well linked into the medical ecosystem. So like that, as in the Translational Medical Device Lab, as well as the Health Innovation Hub, and huge support from the Irish medtech industry. So all across the various different academic and industrial partners, BioInnovate has really strong connections. All of these connections then, fellows on the program can leverage. These connections, though, are really only possible because of the leadership team. So Professor Martin O'Halloran, who will be on the Q&A section later in the webinar, as well as Professor Mark Bruzzi, who is the founder of BioInnovate, Professor Faisal Sharif, who has done amazing work in developing the clinical portfolio of the program, Dr. Sinead Walsh, who's the Director of Operations, and then Anne Byrne, who pulls the whole thing together. So the core team has, had a phenomenal success in getting this program to where it is to date. Supporting the team as well is also a network of mentors. So the fellows, when they're on the program, have their own team, but they also have the program team and then mentors that they can lean on. Because like that, as in, it's a incredibly fast-paced program. So, the program itself and the program support team are really conscious of being there to support the fellows and using the ecosystem that they've developed to help support those fellows as well. Moving on to the actual structure. So if I apply and if I'm lucky enough to get on the program, what does that mean? Well, as I said, the process itself is very competitive, but if you're not in, you can't win. The program has recruited from various different areas. So please do go ahead and apply. If you're already spending time on a Thursday evening on a webinar, you probably have already thought about it. So I'd say go ahead and make the jump. It's well worth applying. If you are successful, there will only be 12 fellows picked. So there'll be 3 teams with 4 fellows on each team. Now, money makes the world go round, so it is important to note that each fellow receives a stipend. The stipend is €30,000 a year, very kindly supported by Enterprise Ireland, who've done so since the start of the program. This does not include course fees, so course fees are approximately €5,000. So you're left with €25,000 of stipend, but on practical basis, stipends are not taxed. So it's equivalent to an approximate €45,000 pre-tax salary. Now, that, it's not going to set the world on fire, but it definitely helps to pay the bills. And for anybody who is considering leaving a current position, that's kind of how you will be reimbursed over the course of the period. Similarly, for those who are more academically inclined, fellows at the end of the program have an opportunity to receive a postgraduate diploma or a master's in bioinnovation. So you definitely get to add letters after your name. However, the most important thing is the actual experience. So the learning of the process, and that's what BioInnovate is about. It's to teach the next generation of entrepreneurs. It's to teach people how to really make a big impact in medical technologies. So to that end, as I touched on briefly earlier on, identify, invent, and implement is what you're going to learn to do. You're going to learn to identify an unmet clinical need. So an unmet clinical need is a clinical situation or scenario that hasn't been adequately addressed. It's potentially been ignored, or in some cases, it hasn't even been realized yet. So you're going to spend your time learning how to identify unmet clinical needs. Following on from that, easier said than done, but you use your brain power and that of your team to invent a solution. And when you have a reasonable solution to your unmet clinical need, you then try and implement that solution to become a viable business. So for example, we identified the treatment of a particular joint arthritis as our unmet clinical need. We identified it and then invented the first evidence-based solution to it, and then spun out a company and have since raised many millions of euros in capital funding and are now in clinical trials. So we're now implementing. So that's really the process that you learn, and it's extremely educational. It's very worthwhile. It's also actually a bit of fun as well. As regards to the teams themselves, they're made up usually of multidisciplinary team. So my background is medicine. I graduated in 2006 from ECD Medical School, so I was the clinician on the team. There's traditionally a engineering or technical person supported by a commercialization person, and then additionally a scientific AI data person on the team. That's not always a hard and fast rule. So while they're the traditional teams that the program looks for, if that is not your background, don't let it stop you applying for the BioInnovate program, because as I said, people from other backgrounds have also got on the program and have been remarkably successful. Once you are on the program, you will be immersed in a clinical area. Those clinical areas change from year to year. So it may be gastroenterology, cardiology, connected health, data in medtech, gynecology, oncology, any of the particular areas. Those areas change from year to year and are based on various different factors. But really, as I said, the important part of this is the education of the process and learning to maximize your multidisciplinary team. It's very rare that a clinician gets to work with an engineer and someone who's got a commercial background and someone who's got a medical science background. And similarly, the same goes for the engineer working with the same team. So really, as in the quote on the slide deck there of individually we're one drop, together we're an ocean. The reason I picked that is because, as you know, it's based in Galway and it rains a lot in Galway. But at the same time, Galway is on the edge of the Atlantic. It's on the wild Atlantic way. So you get used to the rain and the ocean is on your doorstep. But really, as in, it's all about being part of a multidisciplinary team in a situation that you probably will be unlikely to ever get again. Part of that is because you get, for the first 2 months, for August and September, you get to do clinical immersion. So this is where you're literally dropped into the clinical situation and you get to identify unmet clinical needs. You may be in outpatients, ambulatory daycare centers. You may be in patients' homes. You may be scrubbed in theatre, holding retractors for a surgeon. You're literally in there working with the clinicians face to face that level of immersion, it doesn't really happen very many places. And to get that level of immersion with a multidisciplinary team and all the insights that they have is a really special situation. Out of that then springs your unmet clinical needs, which you then identify and then filter to needs that you really feel like you want to address for various different reasons. And that brings you then kind of back into December, where you start to validate those needs, to go back into clinic, make sure that you understood the need correctly, etc. Which brings you back around then the change of the year, where you then try and kind of move into the next phase where you ideate. You try and come up as best you can with a cogent solution to the needs that you've met. And then really, again, kind of challenge the unmet clinical needs, the solution that you have, but then start to kind of prepare your business case. So if I have this unmet clinical need and if I solve it in the way that I think I can solve it, is that actually, does that stack up? Is there a business case behind it? So as you finish off then in April, you should have your business case prepared, at which point then obviously you potentially will be seeking additional funding. You will then be, looking at closing out your academic portfolio in terms of either the diploma or the master's and deciding where you want to go next. The fellows that have done and completed BioInnovate have been incredibly successful. The sum of the spin-outs, only some of them are actually demonstrated on the screen. Their logos are demonstrated on the screen. There's actually more than this, but otherwise the logos get so small that you can't actually see them. But from my point of view, as a clinician by training, everything that I try and do is evidence-based. So then what's the evidence behind it? What's the science behind it? And I guess to that end, when you look at the key performance indicators of BioInnovate, there is science behind the success. So 130 fellows have been trained over an 11-year period. 35 different technologies have received 18.3 million euros in post-BioInnovate funding. But companies coming out of BioInnovate have raised a staggering 230 million. So I think as in probably by the time the program starts, it'll be $250 million in private funding and grant funding will have been raised by BioInnovate spin-outs. But in addition to that, we've also looked at over 20 areas and engaged over 1,000 clinicians in order to try and ultimately make the program success by tackling unmet clinical needs. 191 patents have been granted and well over 3,000 patients have been treated. I'd love if that slide actually had a little ticker of the number of patients treated, because literally, as in that's going up every single day. So if I haven't convinced you already as to why you should apply, to summarize, why would anybody not want to apply for the BioInnovate program? First of all, the BioInnovate program is an absolutely unrivaled opportunity to accelerate your career. When you look at people who have done the BioInnovate program, their careers have just come on in leaps and bounds, whether they've returned to an industry that they've been in, taken on a new role in a different environment, or have gone on to be C-level executives in their own startup. It really will just put it puts a rocket under everybody's career. It's something that I don't think anybody I've ever come across has said, you know what, I regret doing that. Everybody, no matter what, has always said that it's provided a huge input and a huge positive input to their career. Number two, the program has a proven success. So as I said, all of the key performance indicators show that the program does what it says on the tin. It really gets people out there and it educates people and it gives them the skills that they need. And that's been demonstrated in all the various different indicators such as patents and fundraising and whatnot. But ultimately, the most important thing is the number of patients treated. The BioInnovate is really there to drive medical innovation. And medical innovation is a very privileged thing to be part of. It's extremely gratifying when you have identified an unmet clinical need, developed a solution for that need, and then when you see clinical data come in and people's pain being reduced, their functionality being increased, their quality of life scores improving, and you go, hey, do you know what? Actually, I did that. I started from the scratch. I identified my unmet clinical need. I invented the solution and I implemented the solution, and now I'm helping patients. And BioInnovate has already helped thousands of patients. And as these spin-outs continue, it'll be tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands. So to be in that position and part of that process is an extremely privileged position. So, it's a great thing to do. So down to the actual date, you have time left. The closing date for applications is the 28th of February. So get scribbling, get those applications in. About early March, you'll find out if you've been made the shortlist. If you've been shortlisted, well done. If you haven't, apply again. Don't let it put you off, but definitely apply on this occasion. Early May, 25th of March, recruitment day. Have a coffee in the morning and then have another coffee in the morning and then have another coffee on your way into recruitment day. It is full on. It is fun. It's hectic. It is, it's a day you won't forget either way. But the reason why it is so important is because there's only 12 spots on this program, and the program directors and the program team, want to pick out exactly the best possible people for this program and have done so in the past. 14th of August, D-Day. If you're one of the final 12, that's when you're starting the new chapter in your career. Dare I say, a new chapter in your life, because that has happened to people where they had no intention of ever, being a CEO of a startup or CTO of a startup, and all of a sudden 2 years later, that's where they are. So, it's just, I don't know how to round out emphasizing. It's just the best program. It's so interesting. It's so innovative. It's so challenging. And ultimately, it's a great thing that the program is based on, which is helping patients. So for those of you who haven't already reached out to the program team, please feel free to contact Sinead, Martin, or general inquiries to info@bioinnovate.ie. And have a look at the website. There's loads of information there, but do go ahead and apply. And to further convince you of it, I'm going to hand over now. I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sinead Walsh and Martin O'Halloran, who are going to talk to Annette Kent, who's Chief Clinical Officer of Fire One, Brendan Staunton, CEO of Amara Therapeutics, and Camille O'Malley, who's CTO of Extremity Medical, who'll all provide really interesting background as to how they've come to be in the position that they're in, and also give you an idea to the various different outcomes that people can have of on the program. So Martin, if it's okay with you, I will hand over to yourself and let you start the Q&A.
Super, thanks Brendan. And just to reinforce that point, I always think there's three elements to BioInnovate. One is the process, and as you mentioned, the biodesign process as well, validated. The second is the ecosystem, and we do have a unique ecosystem with our, the universities, our clinical partners, all the support we get from industry, coming in and mentoring and supporting our teams. But probably the biggest thing is the quality of our candidates, and I think you'll see that on the people we're talking to this evening. I always think if we provided no training to these 12 people, they'd do something good in a year. And, you can see that, in Brendan's presentation and the outputs from our other panelists. I think I'm going to introduce you to the three panelists, and we're going to put some questions, but I'm really conscious for the attendees that this is your session. So we know the program, we know the good parts and the challenging parts, but it's a big step for you guys to apply and to consider it. So I'd like, if you could, to put any questions or concerns or comments you might have in the web chat, and we'll try and get to them during the process. But to kick things off, I'm going to turn to Annette Kent, who's the Clinical Director at Fire One and is an alumni of our program from 2016. Annette, I might just open up by asking about, your experience before BioInnovate and what attracted you to the program, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everybody. What attracted me to the program, I suppose, let me go back to, where I started. I have a PhD in cardiovascular pharmacology. I had spent a number of years in the pharmaceutical industry. I had worked in clinical research training and also clinical research monitoring as a CRA in ICON and also GSK. And then I spent quite a number of years in the medical department, leading the medical department in Amgen here in Ireland, and also having a role in Europe. And as I call it, there was a changing of the guard and a change in positions at the time. And in looking around and I suppose Amgen offered me the time to look. And I remember going to a seminar in Dublin. It was the equivalent to this, but it was in person, and it really lit my fire in terms of reinventing I suppose, where I come from. And historically, I wouldn't have been that interested in medical devices, but suddenly, I came home from that webinar and it really had lit my fire. And a couple of conversations later, not sure I was the entrepreneur that we might think going into this. But hey, I went for it. And as Brendan talked about the very busy day leading on the interview day, it was a journey, but it was one of the journeys I'll never forget. It was brilliant. So that was my career to date. So I'd led the medical department at Amgen, and the changes I needed to leave, not leave Amgen, but I needed a change. So the change came about, redundancy came my way, and I had the opportunity to reinvent my career.
Super. And so can you talk a little bit more about that change? So how are you different coming out of the program as opposed to going in?
Well, firstly, I didn't have any clinical or I suppose medical device experience. My PhD was in cardiovascular pharmacology. I'm now back working in heart failure, so I understand a lot of the lingo that we need to use. So it's a sweet spot for me in that what I gleaned from doing the program was I got a really deep understanding of the medical device space, working with, developing your needs, being in the cath lab right up to, and I was in the cardiothoracic team that year. So working right through to developing concepts, developing business cases, etc. In terms of, what I took from the program was that it allowed me to transition to medical devices with confidence. And that's probably one thing that has given me is the confidence to go into an industry that I didn't have the confidence probably beforehand. And it took the mystery out of medical devices.
Great, yeah. And I suppose, Annette, you're one that's mentioned a lot, who someone as an alumni who supports a lot of our startup companies and give advice on the clinical trials aspect in particular. But I think it's something we talk about the fellowship a lot, but maybe you could talk about, the alumni supports and the broader, beyond that 1-year fellowship, like what supports are available beyond the core program.
Yeah, I think I know one of the VCs came into us during our time in Galway in August. And one thing he mentioned was the alumni that we were getting. And I reached out to Bavernum today to touch base with them. I more recently, I've met Brendan a lot through other engagements, but it's there for us all the time in terms of there's always someone that has encountered the problem that you've come up against. So that alumni is everywhere we go. The other aspect I would say is that I think it's really important to acknowledge, Mark Bursey got us to introduce ourselves individually, and he said, you're going to do this every day on the program, so get used to it. But I'm still doing it. Like, not a day goes by where you have to say who I am, what I'm doing. And it changes slightly every day, depending on who you're saying. But what I'm saying is that that education going through BioInnovate, getting very comfortable with who you were as the scientific professional, the business professional, the CFO, whoever it was, leading that medical device company, because you'll continue doing it. You'll be in front of VCs, you'll be in front of medical doctors, but BioInnovate is the door opener. When you say that you're in the program that was affiliated to the Stanford Biodesign, that just goes, So you know what you're talking about, basically. Okay.
And like, I think we're all aware that FAR 1 is this incredible success, right? And, you've been there from the start. Is it still influencing your career, BioInnovate, or, is there still value to it at this stage? Because now it's obviously, it's a big company at this stage and doing a lot.
Do you want the real answer or the
real answer?
I'm jesting. Is that I've had some absolute career highs in FAR 1. Getting to design, write the protocol for first in human study and getting that first patient. I can still remember us as a team in Prague doing that just over 3 years ago. in recent weeks, we've had FDA approval for another study. So again, another career high. I mean, you don't get the opportunity to do all of these in bigger companies. You do this in smaller companies, I think. So I think not only for me personally to do that, but for companies in Ireland to be able to get, first in human patients, wherever they're doing them, to get FDA approval for studies. We've seen in the last week other BioInnovate alumni actually getting FDA approval for devices as well. That's just heartwarming. And but the other part of it is it's value to patients. And that's what we're trying to do in FAR 1, is bringing, the normal back to heart failure.
Yeah, it's super. And it's something I don't think that we talk about a lot, that 75% of our companies in Ireland are Indigenous Irish companies, which is really amazing. And I think FAR 1 are really doing great things. So thanks for that, Annette. I might just turn to Brendan Staunton. So Brendan is CEO and co-founder of Amara Therapeutics, and they're looking at developing digital solutions for pelvic and bladder health, which is very different from what we would have thought as traditional medical devices in Ireland. Brendan, I suppose your need is quite different and your solution is quite different, but maybe you could talk about that in context of kind of the clinical immersion part that you would have done within BioInnovate.
Yeah, sure. I guess from week one, we were thrown right into the deep end. I think the first week we've seen 3 or 4 live births, C-sections, laparoscopic procedures. And for someone who had kind of limited experience in that whole area, it was definitely, it was really, a great experience. And we spent 10 weeks going around Ireland, mainly maternity hospitals, trying to identify those needs. So I guess I never thought I'd end up working in pelvic and bladder health, but here we are 5 years later. It's a really exciting space, lots of opportunity. I guess I'll just say a bit about our company. So you're right, digital isn't really the traditional BioInnovate medical device route, but we found a really strong need to deliver more accessible first-line treatments for patients suffering with pelvic health conditions. So we've developed a digital platform that uses apps to essentially treat patients, and then we take the data and deliver that back to the clinician through the electronic health record. So definitely outside the scope, but again, it's all about finding that need, and then you have to come up with a solution to fit that need. But with anyone I see, I was kind of glad to see that you've changed one of the descriptions of the participants to kind of digital science AI, and I think it's a really exciting space. I think COVID has really accelerated digital massively. So hopefully we'll see more digital products coming out of the program, which would be great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to say that that's coming from investors, so investors want to see more smart medical devices. And so I think that's important as well for our attendees to realize, like, we're not purely mechanical engineers anymore. We're data scientists, we're electronic engineers. And I think that's reflected by some of the projects we're seeing coming out of the program. I suppose, so one thing we talk a lot about is that fundraising piece, and as you're building and scaling your company, I'd imagine that's a big part of what you're doing at the moment. Do you think, any of the skills that developed in the program are supporting that activity? How are you finding that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gives you a really solid base to understand exactly what investors are looking for, what kind of milestones you have to hit at certain points on your journey. Fundraising network is everything. And I guess you're really exposed to investors from day one. A lot of local investors come in and talk to you about, exactly what kind of milestones they expect you to hit at certain times. There's obviously fantastic support around kind of the financials as well. And obviously Enterprise Ireland, closely linked to the program. They kind of help you after the course as well, as to get yourself more investor ready. So I suppose with anyone with limited kind of financial or fundraising experience, that's definitely part of the journey, and all the supports are available to you to kind of get you up to that level.
Okay, great. Just to acknowledge the questions that are coming in on the Q&A. We'll leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end, and we'll try and get to those. So thanks for those, and please keep them coming. So one of the things which kind of interests me, Brendan, is that you, like many of our fellows, came in with, especially on the commercial side, came in with an MBA. And so can you talk about let's say the difference. So someone coming, you might say, okay, this is a commercial medtech program, but you had an MBA coming in. So maybe you could talk about, let's say, the differences or the different types of skill sets that you developed across the different programs.
Yeah, I think like medical devices is hard. You really have to have a really broad understanding of a number of different topics: regulatory, reimbursement, clinical trials, fundraising. So, you know, I think it really gives you that broad education, and you really have to be, you know, at a certain level at all those topics and kind of bring them all together into one coherent story. So I have to say, I think the program really does a great job of covering off all those areas. You don't have to be an expert in regulation, but you need to know the difference between a 510K and a de novo application, and maybe go a little bit deeper than that. In reimbursement, you need to know a little bit about coding. So all that is really covered. And then, you know, later on when you need to go a little bit more in depth, at least you can hang in the conversation and get external experts to kind of supplement your own knowledge. So the MBA was useful. I think, you know, the program is kind of like an MBA. It's broad. It covers lots of different topics. So I think both of them kind of work really well together.
Super. And so this is probably a difficult question, but one of the things I think when people are applying for these type of courses is they have to understand, is the course a fit for them? Are they a fit for the course as well? So maybe you could talk about like what's difficult about the course, so what are the challenges with it, and what should people be prepared for?
Yeah, I think like the team is the toughest bit, but as Brendan said earlier, the team is actually where the magic is, right? So you're bringing 4 people with completely different backgrounds, completely different ways of thinking, completely different experiences, and you're putting them all in the same room. So naturally, there's going to be conflict of opinion, and for me, that was kind of the hardest bit. It was trying to understand where people are coming from and kind of how to actually get the best out of each member of the team. And again, I think our year especially, I don't know what happened the year before, maybe there's a lot of fighting, but they put a lot of effort into conflict and constructive conflict. And that's something we got really good at as a team, is learn how to deal when there is a clash of ideologies or a clash of thoughts, and really, you know, understanding that we're all, you know, if you understand what everyone's motive is to be there, you can leave everything on the table and make use of the fantastic bar, as Brendan also pointed out afterwards. You know, so you really have to leave everything in there and find a way to work together as a team. But that's definitely the most challenging thing. You're working very closely with people for a period of 10 months. You're together every day and really get to know each other. But to me, that was the tough bit. And I'm still on really good terms with everyone in my team, obviously, and we all went off to do separate projects. But yeah, for me, that was the biggest challenge kind of day to day, was figuring out how we actually all succeed and all get what we want out of the program individually.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think, so it's what makes the program difficult, and also what makes it work is that almost everyone coming into the program, this is really for the attendees to understand, everyone coming into the program is giving up something. And so they have to make it work. And so that means you get really focused people and really driven people. And that has, the good side of that is we deliver, and, you know, Brendan showed the real quality of the companies coming out, and we get people like Brendan and Camille and Annette and all these people building these companies, but that's because they're really driven. And if you put 12 really driven people in a program, that's going to happen. But like, I would think it's almost a necessity to have people like that and to have that level of conflict. So I think that's a really great point. Thanks, Brendan. Our final panelist is Camille, who is CTO and CEO and co-founder of Extremity. Camille, so one of the things that we're really proud of in the program is the number of female founders coming out of BioInnovate, and this is a trend we'd like to continue. You know, we've I think that maybe a third of our companies have female founders, and almost half of our fellows have been female, and that's, I would say, purely because we recruit based on excellence, and I think that's great. Maybe you could talk about your experience of the program, and, you know, some advice for maybe female applicants who might be considering applying.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think it's nowadays a very important aspect, kind of women in STEM, and particularly women in medtech. And I think for me, similar to Annette, I didn't have a medtech background. You know, I was a chemist originally, a polymer chemist, and then in pharmaceuticals. So I really didn't know that much about medical devices. And I think women in particular, can often feel a little bit like, you know, medtech is a very male dominated space, which it has been traditionally. And programs like this would lean, as you said, more towards the traditional mechanical engineer or, you know, the consultant male doctor, whatever that might be. But the program itself is very, you know, it's very even, and it's very kind of a good space for women to kind of make that leap into medtech in particular. And, you know, I know that I definitely went in with a sense of being, you know, other than, and maybe a good bit of imposter syndrome. But what you do find at the end of the very first day was everybody else there felt the same way, whether they're male or female, whether they had, you know, 15 years in medtech or not a day in medtech. Everyone was feeling like this is, as you said, leaving something behind, embracing a kind of new way to look at a career or to look at an industry, and sort of, you know, opening themselves up to that in a way. So I would say if there was any female applicants on the call and considering it and thinking, oh, well, maybe I only have, you know, 9 out of 10 of the aspects that they're looking for, don't think like that. Definitely dive right in. You know, and we have a very, very strong cohort of female founders, females who are taking on new roles, not just in startups, but in other parts of the medtech industry, and a good group here in Galway and also in Dublin. So I would definitely encourage them to apply.
Super, yeah, I think that's really important. And I think given the program is now 11 years in, you can see precedent of female founders and female innovators doing really well, and I think that's really important. So I think it's a great point, Camille. Just on a broader note, so what attributes do you think would an ideal fellow have, right? Because you've been in there in the trenches, and you know, any of the rest of the panelists feel free to join in. But what do you think are the must-haves for people coming into the program?
I think that, you know, background and your kind of degrees and stuff can only take you so far through the application process, and all of the rest of you, all of your personality traits and how you work on a team, all of that's going to come out if you make it to the recruitment day. So I would say the number one thing I would say a fellow needs to be is just flexible, because you really don't know what the year is going to throw at you. You know, the situations, you know, Brendan talked about witnessing births. I was in many hip replacements, knee replacements, spinal surgery, you know, also in on a couple of conversations with patients and stuff. And you don't expect that when you apply, when you send off the email. So I'd say be flexible in terms of what the year is going to show you, but also what it's going to show you about yourself. Because it's a journey of, you know, finding the needs, discovering maybe a new technology or a new way of looking at a technology, and maybe ultimately a startup. But it's also about a little bit about finding yourself. You know, you're in a very pressurized environment, a very encouraging, innovative environment, but it is full on, and you're, as Brendan said, you're with your team all the time. You can't get away from them, but they end up becoming, you know, your kind of your bed of information and people that you lean on, and then that extends into the alumni. They're kind of always there. So I would say flexible is the number one trait I would give.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I might open that up to the other panelists. So I think flexibility for sure, because you're being asked to do something else. Is there anything else that people would add to that? To know, Annette or Brendan, or
just reiterate that from an open mind, because as Camilla said, I know when I sat in as I mentioned, the entrepreneur, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur, and I didn't go in wanting a comp fund as such, but I didn't know what I wanted. And I didn't know where the road was going to be leading me to. So an open mind as to what the program could open up for you. And then opportunities came, and far one happened. But other opportunities could have emerged out of that too. So it's to be open.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Brendan, you had one?
Yeah, I think mine, Martin, would be a curiosity. So as in you have 10 months in the most amazing environment. So for the first 2 months, you're like that, as in you're watching people with their, you know, spine uncovered or giving birth. You're in a position where you can learn so much so fast that you need a natural curiosity, and that curiosity has to be flexible so that you can maximize those learning positions. Similarly, as in be curious with your other teammates. So you're going in as 1 in 4 and you've got a sub-speciality within that other 4, but your other 3 teammates are really high caliber professionals who have so much from whom you can learn. You need to be curious with your teammates as well, and like that, as in the old adage of standing on the shoulders of giants, you need to maximize other people's skills and knowledge so that, to your own benefit. But curiosity is definitely, I think, what keeps you going through, because there is, it's such a privileged learning position that to remain curious is so important throughout it all.
Yeah, I think that's great. And like the only thing I would add to that is I think you need to be a chameleon. You need to be able to adapt, because you're an observer to begin with, then you're an engineer, then you're a business person, then you're a HR person in your own company, and it's that ability to adapt. And so, yeah, it's not easy.
Which means, Martin, it's never boring is the thing. So it's never boring,
exactly.
because you might be HR one day and then you might be talking to the FDA the next day, and you have to carry off both with the same level. So it certainly means it's never boring.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to turn to just some of the questions are very, I suppose, process generated, and any of them that we don't address here online, we'll address offline. So we might follow up with the Q&A for just kind of the process ones. But so one of them, which I think would suit the panel here, is just what happens after year 1. So, some people go back to industry or will go back to medicine, but for the people who go into the startup ecosystem, maybe you could talk about that. Someone might take that question.
I can take that one if you want.
Yeah, great.
So luckily, the fact that the program is very aligned with Enterprise Ireland, there are supports available for people who want to progress and actually further develop their concept. So there is what's called a commercialization fund, which a lot of teams apply for after. And that's essentially a 2-year research project with the aim of actually commercializing your research at the end of it. So it gives you time to validate your concepts and really experiment and test out your ideas. We're really fortunate to have that. Even in the Stanford Biodesign program, they don't have such a mechanism. So they're kind of out on their own, trying to raise investor capital straight away. So there's really excellent supports after the fact that is the journey that people want to take. That's what the majority of companies take. And that's also another hard journey. It's another 1 or 2 years usually. But it's also, very rewarding, and it allows you to really put all your hard work over the year into action. So that's what the majority of companies do.
That's great. Yeah, and just I suppose if you look at just to add to that, for the 11 years, about 50% of our alumni go into startups that they co-found themselves, and then another 16% go into startups that maybe have pre-existed. So about 2/3 of the fellows end up in startups, and then the other third will go back to medicine or go back to industry or that. So I think that's just a good stat to keep in mind. There's a question there about, yeah, sorry.
Just to add to that, Martin, quickly, I would say I know that for fellows when they apply and even when they begin the process, there can be a sort of hyper focus on the end of what's going to come next and what's going to come next, because the program is going to end. And one thing I would say is, there's an incredible support network of mentors within the program, but also the alumni themselves that can often maybe see your progress or see traits or see opportunities for you as you go through. And so they're always there to kind of, guide you. If you got to the end and you felt you had a great need, but maybe you're not very strong from a commercial sense, there are supports there if you want to take it on, and many different avenues. So, it's never comes down to just kind of you on your own trying to get through the year and trying to find an exit at the end. There's a huge support network. One, we certainly, I think everyone on this call connects with again and again, and they will find, help you find what's right for you, whether that be going forward in a startup, maybe it's joining with another team member to do a startup, or whether that's to go back into industry. So I would say it's important, but I would say it's not worth hyper focusing on. If you're interested in applying, then apply and let the year take you, if you like.
Yeah, great. That's great advice. There's a couple of general questions about, like, let's say foreign students applying. Just to be 100% clear, like, our goal in recruitment is excellence, whether you're Irish, European, non-European, whatever. So we've had a really good mixture, and probably a growing number of international fellows on the program, and it's been really good for us. I mean, if you're only recruiting people who are conveniently located, we're missing out, and we can't afford that. We need to be bringing the best and the brightest to the program. So absolutely, we're open to international applications. There are some questions about, like, being located in Ireland or located in Galway. So it's such an intense program. You do need to be on site, and so we have some flexibility about whether you're on site for 5 days a week versus 3 days a week. We work with people who may be located elsewhere in Ireland, but really, with the intensity of the program, and the requirement to be on site in the hospitals observing clinics, you really need to be based in Ireland, and ideally based in Galway for the duration of the program. Just trying to see if there's other generally our preference is to do all of the interviews in person. In exceptional cases, for some international students, we have facilitated remote, but we have a really rigorous recruitment process, and so, like, our preference is to have it in person, but we can in exceptional services for the right candidates facilitate remote. So there's a question here. Again, I'll open this to the panel. At the end of the program, and if there's a clear business case, do you have to enter into the EI-COM fund process? So I think the question is, why would you do it? Maybe that's the question. Why would you, or what's the advantage of going into the EI-COM fund versus just starting the business yourself, or someone might want to take that.
I suppose, Martin, just from a practical point of view, so I was BioInnovate Fellow 2013 to 2014, and then we were a commercialization fund 2015 to 2017, and then spun out a company in 2017. The Enterprise Ireland Commercialization Fund is one of the best funding mechanisms for medtech startups there is in the world. It's a phenomenal support, because by the end of the BioInnovate program, you are probably very enthused about your unmet clinical need. You've been educated in the, many of the areas that you have to understand in order to make a company work. And then Enterprise Ireland offer you several €100,000 of support to get your concept to a point where you can go and raise additional funding. Elsewhere in the world, in similar situations, people are turning around to angel investors, or what they kind of used to always call friends, families, and fools, to try and get that initial €500,000 to prove your concept, where you then can actually turn around and say, well, actually, there is something to this, and I can raise money with a decent valuation, so my founder equity isn't diluted down entirely. So I think, to answer the question, no, there's absolutely no there's no requirement that you would go ahead and get an Enterprise Ireland commercialization fund. There's also no guarantee that you'll get an Enterprise Ireland commercialization fund, because it's hard won. You need to demonstrate that you are actually a really good, viable product. But given the worldwide funding of similar stage medtech concepts, the Enterprise Ireland commercialization fund is an exceptional mechanism. And I think that's why most people who do spin out go for it. But as I said, no requirement, no guarantee you'll get it, but it makes a lot of sense to go for it.
Yeah, super. There's another question about what age is the oldest applicant we've had. So I'm obviously not going to answer that, but what I will say is, so our recruitment process, it probably leans towards older applicants, because we want people who have established themselves, who've had life experience, and who have that life experience to potentially build a company or become innovators. So there isn't an upper age limit, but I think it's challenging for more junior people to apply, because they're competing with people who have built a career and ideally leaving a successful career to do this. So it's probably the opposite of what was expected. We actually want senior people to be involved in this, and people who have life experience. I think that's really important.
And Martin, I just add to that? I mean, I was 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry, so I suppose put an age bracket on that. You can figure out what age I am, but it's just, that's the amount of years. And I think that's a real selling point for the program, because it does offer that experience. Yeah, there is a range of age, but I don't think that's a barrier. I think that's a plus. Yeah,
100%. 100%. And I said this at the start, and I'm saying it again, like, the success of the program is the success of the recruitment process. So you're being put into a program with 11 other really ambitious, experienced and driven people. So that's a key part of it. There's a question here about, like, what prep should you do to apply? I've always found the best applicants are the people who've spoken to previous fellows. They've done the groundwork, they've understood the program, and so they're coming in with all of that knowledge. So generally when somebody when I hear that somebody's done their due diligence, I go, this is the type of person we want, because you'll be doing due diligence on loads of decisions for the next 5 to 10 years, and you need to be evidence-based and you need to have done your homework. So when I get people contacting me, I'm saying, do your homework, know the program, know the process, talk to people who've been through it before, learn about it. I think that would be the biggest thing I would say. I don't know if any of the panel have any other advice for people in terms of preparing to apply.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, Martin. You doing your due diligence on the program and educating yourself about the program, because the thing is that is what BioInnovate teaches you to do. It teaches you to self-start and to direct your own learning. It's not that the program is going to teach you everything. It teaches you how to figure out what you need to know and where you need to learn it. So that step actually starts before the program, in doing your research on the program and coming to the program with a certain level of understanding. So I think it kind of reflects the program itself.
So, Martin, the program or the interview process actually does bring out the natural ability in people as well. So it's not to overthink the preparation. It's actually the natural abilities do come out. It's a full-on day, but I must say I enjoyed it thoroughly. You're buzzing after it.
Yeah, it's a great point. So you can't hide in the interview process. Sorry, Brendan, go ahead.
I was just going to say one point about, Brendan just spoke there around the actual fellowship. Like, maybe some people come into it with the thought that they're kind of going to be their hand held throughout the whole process. It's very self-driven. We give you the tools to execute, but it's up to you to have the drive and the ambition to actually to complete the program and get what you want out of it. So that's probably one thing that we probably should stress, is that we do require really driven people. You're going to get everything you need, but it's up to you to actually go out there and find the needs.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're close on time, so we've one question, and I should say all of these questions, especially the ones around visas and stipends or whatever, we'll do an FAQ afterwards, and it'll be available to everyone. So because they're mostly kind of procedural questions and university questions. In terms of the criteria looked for when we're selecting for the program, I'll give what I look for, and then I'll open it up to the panel. For one is, I actually think coachability, right? Or the ability to adapt, because you are going to be asked to do an awful lot, and you're going to be asked to change the way you think about innovation. And so I like people who are open-minded, because you're going to have to develop a lot of skills. I think just intelligence, like, being able to process all of that information, and the third bit is intelligence and be able to cooperate, and the third bit then is just drive, because you're going to need it, and you're going to need it for the whole length of, if you go down the company or building a company. So those would be the three for me, but I'll open it up again to the panel for comment.
I think resilience, Martin.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Annette? Just so why resilience? Because I think I know that for sure, but maybe
I suppose I'll talk generically about some of the challenges that we have day to day. In 7 years into a company, and we still have the, you come across a problem, you have to take stock, you have to set back, and the resilience to drive on again. We're going through, another review process at the minute and say, okay, we need to step back and you need to go again. And it's that ability and resilience to take the knocks. Funding's getting tight, and in a startup, and you're going, okay, we're going to fundraise, but you also have all these plans. So you're trying to keep your whole team motivated in terms of. So I think it's the stop start and the adaptability and the resilience around that is really, really important.
Yeah.
And not to get burnt out in the process.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, Camille.
Even just to feed on that, Annette, a little bit, I think also, I never overlook the soft skills, just the ability to be personable, because, you have a lot of very intense interactions, with clinicians, with, very overworked nurses and hospital staff. You have investor negotiations, and then you have your own team to look after. And you're not always kind of quizzing all the time. Sometimes the light bulb moments or the really kind of key piece of information can come out of a very casual comment or conversations as a result of the relationships that you've developed. And then, for me personally, me and my co-founder came together from our team. We didn't know each other at all. And now here we are, 3 or 4 years later in the thick of a startup. So just, taking that on and saying, it's not just about what I have down on paper and how hard I'm going to study at night or whatever. It's also about just having those conversations and being quite personable.
Super. Thanks, Camille. And I think that might be a note where we'll close. But I think one thing I would say just from the last hour is, the best advertisement for our program is our alumni and the companies and the exciting companies and medical devices that they're developing. So I'm glad that it was led by our alumni, and I'd like to really thank them sincerely for their time. And you can see the passion they have. It's a really difficult process, and if you didn't have that passion, you wouldn't do it. To our all our attendees, thank you for attending. Really hope, as Brendan said, that you'll translate this into an application, and looking forward to meeting a lot of you at the recruitment day. We haven't answered all of your questions. We'll follow up with an FAQ. You have our email address. Please use it. But again, just thank you for attending, and thanks again to our speakers, and hopefully see a lot of you in March. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.